So another random assortment of things today in the self-hypnosis playlist. And I'm starting with animals. Animals. So in ESPD, in the new ESPD, have this interesting idea that spirits can change their form. A certain animal may appear as another one. Forest spirit may take the shape of a hunter slative to attract him and lead him into getting lost. And I don't quite remember where I got it. Maybe this was even my own invention. But it was in the past, so it seems to me like some pre-existing thought, but maybe I have invented someday. Or maybe I have heard it, or one does not exclude the other. I invent a lot of things and I like to invent them before I hear of them. It's cool to invent a thing and then to expand this understanding by finding someone else writing on it. So one of those things is a mythic animals. So if Claude Steiner notes how there are mythic heroes, so when a person begins to orient in life and basically they come into a crisis. They come into a crisis and they need a solution. And like PDIA, like problem driven iterative development would say, they import a solution. They look around and mimic something. And what can they mimic? They mimic often the animals. And in transactional analysis, we might stay on the purely rational explanation as fitting most people. Like most people wouldn't have a problem with the rational explanation, rational in quotes, materialistic explanation. So we can simply say that they've been reading children's stories, and children's stories are often about animals. We have like rabbits and foxes and wolves. And when a child faces a crisis, they look to those children's stories, animals, in order to uh, find a model of behavior that would help them. And it's interesting that any model would help because a child simply does not know how to behave in a crisis. And whatever model they pick, it helps them because it gives them some kind of a bone structure. They know how to behave, even if this behavior uh, from our logical perspective has nothing to do with the crisis. It still helps them because it gives them structure. So Steiner mentions how this is often true uh, with characters. So we read books and we appropriate behavior of characters, of mythic heroes. And one of my analysis was to identify what mythic heroes I have. It was very interesting. Mythical character. But so my idea, and maybe someone else's idea, is that even before we have mythic characters, we have mythic animals, and I think maybe I didn't find it right now, but I think this is logical evolution of a mythic animal to a mythic character. I think it should have been mentioned somewhere. And in uh, is it called indigenous cultures? I don't know. In cultures like studied in ESPD, Amazonian culture, for example, where they communicate with spirits, right? When they communicate with spirits, we see that a lot of their spiritual communication takes the form of animals. Um, and if we go into a less materialistic explanation, then we might mention them in collective unconsciousness and in collective memory of humanity. There might be animals living there. So in a kind of a shared telepathic network that might in some form, like noosphere, there might be animals in this on this level, on this layer. And why have I decided to mention animals? My son, for example, likes to mimic some animals at times. So he uses such structures too. And I do also. It's fun. So why did I pick the animals as a subject? Because when John Becker, a French hypnotherapist, was giving us lessons of his therapy of activation of consciousness, here his address in France, in fact. Uh, so this guy, he has a granddaughter, I think, in Russia. So he goes to us to teach us uh, his form of hypnotherapy. And he was giving us this exercise. He likes to give some fun exercises. One of the exercises was to imagine your animal and then to kind of step into it. And then imagine an opposite animal and step into it as well. Funny enough, the animals I have used were the animals I have on my card. So I have a fancy card with a butterfly and a dragon. And I didn't think much of it, but I just used those animals and then I saw animals on my card. Um, so it's, by the way, it's a Rorschach, but I think of it as a butterfly. Uh, But I was using this technique on that day. I was using this technique even before John Becchio told us to, like half an hour before. Uh, I was sitting and using this technique with myself, using a different animal, and it becomes a chicken and the egg question whether. And I told Jean when he gave us this technique, I kind of wondered and just automatically, without thought, I told him that I did this did this like half an hour before. I did this just then, and he looked at me and he said, "I know," and I don't know. Did he know, or did he just decided to know, or did he kind of knew, but on some other? It's open to interpretation. What did he mean by saying that he knew that I was using this technique? And it becomes a chicken and the egg question whether he decided to give us this technique because um, kind of he planned to, or because he maybe knew that I was using it and it gave him the idea, or maybe it just it's kind of synchronicity, like maybe we uh, came up with the same idea uh, at the same time, roughly, as a form of this practical telepathy, kind of collective unconsciousness, which we can interpret, of course, collective unconsciousness as simply a memory. And again, if you read about collective unconsciousness on some Wikipedia, they give you simply a materialistic view that it is simply a memory of previous generations. But uh, if you look more into Jung's writings, then you understand that he was also a mythic, and he took the telepathy into account, and he described some cases of it. And so it might have been a more real time for him than just simply a memory of previous generations. Uh, so why did I pick the animals? Because this practice of thinking of an animal and kind of internally uh, merging with its form, assuming its form, uh, is a case where I see hypnotherapy and magic intersect. Because this is a technique in hypnotherapy that John Becker, hypnotherapist, gave us. And this is also a technique in magic. Yeah. So Aleister Crowley maybe would call it an invocation. Invocation. Uh, I don't know if it's the right place. A form of possession. Invocation. So when we call forth a spirit and um, let it change internal representation, change internal structure, it is invocation. And the animal might be such a spirit. So it was also a case of invocation uh, when we were using these animals during hypnotherapy. And also, it's interesting to me to mention this because I think it's a very powerful technique and underused in hypnotherapy. And I'm glad that John was using it. I also want to see it used more. By the way, I had a guest tonight, and he was telling me about his experiences of invocation, of spontaneous invocation. When he was in a crisis, he has this natural ability to invite different forms of behavior. Very, very strange but very useful experience. Uh, so when we give such technique a name, so why invocation and evocation such a useful words? Because they put a name on these techniques. And when we have a name, we can suddenly have a much greater capacity for using it. So this is also why this is also one of the techniques that I have invented, that I have found, stumbled upon. It is simply the naming technique. So if you do something, if you find yourself doing something interesting, put a name on it, and maybe create a document, with with a headline. So put a name in the headline, and uh, this creates a space for you to explore this further, to develop further this technique. This is very useful, simple naming things. So invocation and evocation, it gives us a name. And now that we have a name, we can see that we can summon spirits, like simply by imagining an animal and resonating and assuming structure, its internal structure. And it is already an invocation. It is already changing even right now when I was simply lightly touching this process. Um, So suddenly we are talking about the nuances of using this technique, and one of the things that I have been playing with is the idea of lifting this. So in a language, in a computer language, we have certain features that are first class. So a language might have a first class for recursion and for tail recursion, or it might be something that is maybe supported, maybe if some optimization are on. So for example, in Haskell you have tail recursion that must work, and in GCC, GNU Compiler Collection, you also have tail recursion in C. So you can use tail recursion in C, but the difference is that in GCC it is an optimization, and you don't know whether it works or not. You have to test for it, and it's hard to reliably depend on it because uh, it might, there might be a fluke and it might go away. Uh, and a lot in a design of something, a lot depends on whether it is first class. If it is first class, it is much easier and much more organic to use it. But also, if it is a first class, it might be designed in a wrong way. So, for example, in the Rust computer language, they wouldn't put concurrency and asynchronous concurrency and parallelism into the language. Instead, they allow different implementations to compete as libraries. And the threading, for example, is implemented as a standard library, but you can use some other library that implements an alternative threading. This is also how it is done in C with threads. So, and that way, instead of building something, instead of risking to build something good or bad into the language, we abscond from this risk and allow it to develop on its own. So I had this idea to lift spirit communication into a first-class citizen in my designs, and I call this a shadow court. And I discovered some nuances with it. And by the way, this is the beauty of working with stuff, with experimenting with such techniques, because uh, you experiment with it and you see that it didn't work for some reason. You give this first-hand experience rather than simply thinking about it. And theorizing. You get a first-hand experience and you discover new things that way. And what I have discovered while playing with Shadow Court is that I have rediscovered something that Hagakure said. Hagakure, let me find it. Um, a single year does not have just spring or summer. A single day too is the same. So what I've discovered when playing with Shadow Court, what I have rediscovered is that we have different that are the parts of our mind, whether it's a closed system or an open system, but it is it has parts, and these parts show different activity and different time, and at different times, different charge. Uh, so in one moment, we might be better uh, optimized, so to speak, but we might the parts of our mind that are that can that want that are willing to work with one subject might be active, and in another moment the parts that are willing to work with a different subject might be more active. So Uh, it's like in spring and autumn and winter, in different times of the year, we have different weather, different conditions, and it doesn't make much of a sense to. Um, Let me open the full code just in case. Uh, it doesn't make much of a sense. Doesn't make much of a sense to. Um, I don't know, to put the seeds into the ground in the winter. Um, for most seeds, it doesn't make much of sense, right? If you have snow, for example, if you have freezing temperature, it doesn't make much of a sense to plant new stuff. And at summer, it doesn't make much of a sense to go skiing. I mean, sometimes there are exceptions, but most of the time there are specific conditions, and in our mind, these conditions also change all the time. Uh, and of course, it's cool if we, with hypnosis, with magic, we can change our state and change the time of the year. It's cool when we have this ability, but it's foolish to always be doing this magic and changing the times of the year because there is a natural organic shifts in our condition. We might want to utilize them as well and keep our system open rather than uh, always dictating what should happen where. So I don't know. I think that a lot of people actually trying to do something. They're trying to tell. Now we have winter. Now we have summer, and they're trying to find techniques to force the to command nature, and this is all they're trying to do. And this is, I think, they measure their progress in how good they are at it. And I don't want to say that, and so I wouldn't say, but to me, it seems more interesting, to listen, to hear, to find in an open system, to find what are those influences and what are those natural changes that are occurring and how can I work with them. So I described this previously, like in January. So she was doing just that. She was working on something maybe important, and it was obvious that she's out of her capacity to work with it. That she should change tack, switch tracks and rest and have a good time and have fun and let her other subsystems, her other parts to play instead of simply churning through whatever it is she was doing. And I was like wondering why wouldn't she do this? Um, And I was treating it in the transactional analysis model of parent and child partly. So the parent, I thought the parent is blind. The parent is blind, like a transactional analysis parent, and this is why why it doesn't just let the children play, that doesn't let her to relax and rest and come back later to this problem. But while playing with shadow chord, I've discovered that there might be more to it. Uh, so it might be not that the parent is blind, but that they doesn't trust the child. So they might think, so if I let the child play, they will break the teapot, they will break the window, they will run away and freeze in the cold, they will immediately like get under the car and end up in the hospital. Or simply they will start playing and they will not surrender uh, the control. They will simply continue. They will simply go on with this place. Like it's time past 12 o'clock or maybe deep into the night, but they are still playing. They have no knowledge of when to stop. This might be what the parent thinks. So it's not that they are simply blind. It's that they do not trust the child and might be even have a good reason not to trust the child. And this is why they do not allow the child to step forward to emerge, to play and rest and have fun. So instead the parent tries to do everything on their own, but they can't be always active because the parent has to sleep. It's like always having a summer, always having a winter. It's like just using the willpower to stop the planet from revolving around the sun and to have it always be a winter planet. Uh, so the parent fails. The parent fails miserably fails at this attempt uh, to seize the control, never to give it up. And when they fail, of course, the child goes wild because when the parent doesn't trust the child in turn have no reason to trust the parent. The child goes wild and often and proves most of the fears the parent has. So it's a positive feedback loop. So it might be a very simple thought, right? might be very simple thought, but I have discovered by playing with shadow chords that sometimes we wouldn't pass the ball. It's like passing the ball in the team, and we wouldn't play. We wouldn't engage in teamwork. We wouldn't play with other spirits. We wouldn't pass the ball because we don't trust them to pass the ball back. We don't trust them to play with us fair. Uh, but another thing, and also I have discovered that the shadow chord metaphor, the way I seen it at first, was to kind of see all those major forces of my psyche, uh, to see them together. But I've discovered that this is not quite how it works for me because different different parts of the psyche might be more or less active at different times, like the times of the year, right? So it's more like I think the term shadow chord is still useful because I think it's used also in the term chord is also used in this sense. So like maybe in astrology, I don't know any of astrology, but maybe like Mars is in the court or Venus is in the court. So something is coming into this place. So shadow court becomes more of a place where something might come to, something might happen. So the court is more like a plaza, like a space, like a uh, royal building where such meetings happen, right? Uh, and it's very interesting to me to reflect, and this is, by the way, why I wanted to make this video in the first place. Uh, in that there is a resonance with something in the gospel, I think. So one of the passages that caught my attention was for a long time this uh, this passage about the accuser, and it isn't just my attention. I remember some Saint Father commenting on this passage. So it's a very interesting, very psychological passage. Uh, so it was informing some of my experience as well. But now I kind of understand it on a different level. Uh, so maybe I should open the traditional translations to kind of give a context, if I can. Yeah, here it is. So, settle matters quickly with your adversary who is talking you to court. When you're on the way to court with the adversary, settle your difference quickly. And the Saint Father was interpreting it as listening to your guardian and angel, for example. Uh, so there are very, very interesting So this anti-deco, opponent, adversary, uh, this reminds me of the inner conflict. I think I was yapping a lot about it. The inner conflict between those spirits and parts of the consciousness. Um, and maybe the first time I've openly yapped about was in Chet Richards' blog, right? So I'd like to mention it. Hmm. So um, I think I've only included the URL. So let me think how else I can find it. Hmm. So here it is. So I've published Chet invited me to publish it on his blog, but this is he changed a few things, so this is a better version of it. So this was the first time when I talked about this uh, more or less in public about these parts of consciousness, society of mind, uh, and of inner conflict, and of importance of inner conflict in understanding different things that happen with us. Uh, uh, so this is kind of where we're coming from. So inner conflict. Uh, when and after I have published this entry in Chet's blog, uh, I had this idea, and maybe I still subscribe to it, that basically a major, if not the primary uh, problem, primary uh, crisis equation, whether a person would develop uh, efficiently or whether they would fall short of their potential. Uh, I don't know how best to describe it, but I think it's a very major, very major question, a central piece, a central point question of whether a person learns to resolve the inner conflict. whether they learn to work with it and to so some people are lucky, they don't have major conflicts maybe, but some people, and this is what I talk about in Chat's blog, that there are sometimes chronic inner conflicts. That's kind of a chronic war. There are two countries that are at war for centuries, and this seeps at their strength that it takes insane amounts of resources and uh, human life and it so it is a major question whether there will be this war in heaven, war between different factions of consciousness, the inner conflict. Uh, if there is such a war, then some of these factions might develop some strange strengths in this constant infighting, like maybe Klingons who become strong because they are not maybe I don't know if this is a good example, but in science fiction and fantasy, this metaphor is sometimes explored that some nation might be stronger because they are always fighting, like Spartans maybe. So there might be some strength developed through this inner conflict, but it might also be preventing a golden age and sapping a lot of resources. So it is a strange question, but a very important one. Uh, so in gospel, when we see this anti-deco, I think now that maybe it hints of this inner conflict, and it urges this phrase. It urges you to uh, see to your inner conflict. See sooner. See sooner. Be fast, quickly. See sooner to your inner conflict and become friends. This agreeing is actually make friends. Uh, so instead of being at war and having the war in heaven between different factions of consciousness, learn instead how to be friends with them, how to work with them in a team, how to be at home with them and allow them to be at home with you. Find a way to not just coexist, but to work toward a common goal. Uh, this might be what this gospel phrase is all about.